Welcome to Chai. Today we have Dr. Severence MacLaughlin. He is the founder of DeLorean AI and wears many hats there, I think CEO as well. Got my awesome co-host, Angela Radcliffe, from the pharmaceutical and healthcare industry. And behind the scenes is Nima Azaraeen, who is our resident data scientist at Mobeus. So today on Chai, as usual, we're going to put everybody's link in the profiles, our profiles in the link in the bottom. We're going to talk about the AI ecosystem. What are the categories of players that are in the ecosystem? What does everyone do? How could you make sense of cloud, models, markets, services, apps, infrastructure, chips? There's a lot of stuff to make sense about. Now, the group that we have here today is, really opinionated. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. Sev and I and Angela had a run-in once where Sev was the chief artificial intelligence officer at Capgemini. I was coming in as one of the speakers in artificial intelligence, and Ange was on the panel, and Sev couldn't make it. And so Ange had to step in for Sev and be the host of the panel. And I think it was me, you, and Manny that have that. We should probably put the link for that video in the bottom as well. So we've had some runway before. We kind of know each other here, and we're gonna get into this conversation. Before we get started, I just wanted to make sure that we set the context for this show. So as everyone is aware, AI, just like every other invention that we've ever seen, has a spectrum of opinions. And we're going to focus today on a particular area in the spectrum, but we wanted to recognize that there are realists, optimists, pessimists on the spectrum. All of these points of views are super important as we think about this technology. There are also evangelists, and there are my favorites, the alarmists. Okay? All of these spectrums are absolutely important, and they should be discussed. And we should discuss them. What we're going to focus on today is this area between the realists and the optimists, because we think that's where the opportunity is, and we're going to cover sort of the ecosystem as it evolves. This is Chai. We always want to make sure we show our beautiful Chai, which was our art that's made by Midjourney. And we're going to go into a discussion today that will cover the following things. It is going to cover hardware. These are the chips. It's going to cover cloud. It's going to cover models. It's going to cover markets. It's going to cover apps. And it's going to cover services. So getting into this conversation, Sev, you have advised the World Health Organization on AI. You've done lots of interesting things in the past. How do you look at where the real opportunity is inside of this ecosystem as you laid out right now? What's the box that's most interesting to you?
So first of all, Ange and Richard, great to see you, and love being on the same platform. I love good conversations, and congratulations, Richie and Ange, for this conversation. So I think this needs to be had, because the term of AI has been bastardized, if you will, and I think with the advent of ChatGPT and OpenAI, the public's interest in AI has skyrocketed. And unfortunately, there is a lot of misinformation about that, and mostly opinions, more smoke than actual fire. So I think these types of conversations with industry experts is necessary, not only for ourselves to be just good scientists, but for the public to actually understand what's real and what's hype. And those two extreme left and right, Richie, like you said, I think when I look at these boxes, right now it's hardware in terms of can we do what we think we can do, and then the markets and the applications. And I say that because a lot of the pessimists, if you will, Richie, will say, well, ML is AI, right? And that's not the case. Machine learning is a tool, a data science tool that can be incorporated in artificial intelligence. And if you take the opinion that it is AI, which it's not, the pessimists will say, well, anybody can draw a line through a bunch of data, and that's a reverse correlation or whatnot. But the truth there is that we bypassed, because of the big data revolution of the early 2000s, right, and piping this large amount of data and capturing data digitally, we are now able to do what was possible in 1954 with Turing and the godfathers of the mathematics behind these MLs. But now that we have the volume of data, we can actually, supply the machine with it. What we're going through another revolution is, now that we have such large amounts of data, we need the compute power and the chips. So you see NVIDIA, you see SambaNova, and then the geopolitical issues around those chip manufacturing. So that's really important, and that affects cloud as the hyperscaler in terms of, when we talk to clients, Richie, if they're on Microsoft Azure, great technology, Google Cloud Platform, great technology, AWS, great technology. But the cost associated in doing that, in the egress and ingress of the data, is significant, but also it's not as fast as doing it in database, where you would be doing it at NVIDIA or Teradata or Snowflake. So that's one side of it.
Yep.
Can we actually do the infrastructure? The other side of it is, I think, the markets, right? So, and I hate the word use case, right? So like we have, DeLorean AI's major product is medical AI, right? So we're solving healthcare issues for patients using AI. That's our solution. But we need NVIDIA, we need Teradata, we need Snowflake to live in that environment. Yep. But the failure of having a good solution or market, if you will, is, and I'm not calling that, but SambaNova is great company, great technology, but they're only the technology. They don't have a solution for the market to buy. So I think the solutions are important to access the infrastructure, and then the caution in the industry is that is it validated, right? Is this actually working, right? So with ChatGPT, we're seeing a lot of things that are not coming out true or validated in the output, and that scares the business side of the equation.
Yeah, we talked a little bit last week about whether hallucination was a bug or by design. So Seb, you've touched on, so let's set these up, right? So hardware, cloud, models, markets. So these are markets for models, apps that could be built, and services. And Nima, I'll ask you to remind me here. So from a hardware side, we've got NVIDIA, right? We have Intel. I would say Apple will be a player on the silicon side. AMD. Anyone else that you guys want to mention there from a hardware perspective?
Yeah, SambaNova, yeah, definitely.
And how do you spell that?
I would.
SambaNova, like the dance.
That is Samba. It's Samba like the dance.
Okay, you could tell that I'm not very familiar with the silicon. Let's get about 4 or 5 of these so we can start to draw out this ecosystem, right? So as we think about cloud, AWS, right? Azure, right? Google, and let's say Oracle, right?
Oh, that's a really good one. They're actually making a huge push. I mean, Larry bought Cerner for a reason, right? So,
good call out.
Yeah, and then the other one, guys, is like in between, right? Is like Teradata and Snowflake, right? They're in database and they're moving to the cloud. Like are they a sub-market?
Right. So I think we're going to have to size for the audience what's inside the boxes as well, and what's between the boxes as well. So model-wise,
SambaNova is somewhere in between as well.
Okay, we'll be between here. So we'll do some work on the screen to kind of pull those together, right? So models, we've got foundational, which is the Vaswani and DeepMind paper. We've got graph type networks, all right? I think that was Scarsali. We've got recurrent. We got convolutional. We've got recursive, and then we got the original Hinton paper. I'm just going to call that multi-layer. We can't fit perceptrons on the screen.
Do you see the new paper that came out on a liquid?
Right. Yep. Liquid networks.
Liquid neural.
Yep.
Train in that.
So,
we're going to geek
so,
out.
so I'm just going to put liquid on like the top up here, right? And for everyone who's listening, Liquid are networks that can kind of retrain themselves on the fly, and they have a whole different, kind of loss model on them. So models are there, clouds are there, hardware is there, and we've already agreed that there's going to be some intersection in between the two. Markets, we've got Hugging Face, Cohere. Any other markets that jump out that we want to make sure we position here?
H2O AI, would they be? You can tell me I'm wrong. Or Innovator for healthcare, with their app store.
I think they're getting there. I think people are starting to see the market here and saying, where do we get in, right? So yeah, Hugging Face to me is really established. They're a lead here. Like they've got the the start on everybody else.
Nima, you're in the markets a lot. Any other market that you would?
No, that's I think if we want to categorize, that's the best we can come up with, because these are the huge players. The others are kind of like in a specific area. Yeah.
So if you're a CIO, CTO, CDO in a large Fortune 500 organization right now, you can start to kind of map the market across these various squares that we have here. Apps, obviously we can have text apps, image apps, video apps, voice apps, VOICE, and I'm just going to say protein. And there are many other types of apps here, and I think we made this point on the last show, which is anything that can be dematerialized or digitized can theoretically be modeled, simulated, and generated. And if you think about protein, it's 20 amino acids, right? Each represented by a letter in the alphabet, and that's where you see things like AlphaFold, etc. And services, I think there is. I love this idea of data mastery. There is things like trust, but we'll leave that for the bottom. There's training, fine-tuning. There is compliance, right? There's also strategy, right? That needs to get into this. And these players over here, these are your general consulting services or management consulting services. This is your Accenture, KPMG, Deloitte, IBM plays in that area, etc. So if you look at this lineup here and you look at what's going on here, what you're seeing is this is an ecosystem that's starting to play with each other, right? And let's just position this for a second. Like you could see someone who generates a model partner with a cloud, right? So we saw Facebook, partner with Microsoft, where the open source model that they put out is now going to be run in the Azure cloud, right? As you lay this out, and Sev, I want to go back to you now. When you think about this ecosystem, where are the best opportunities for either companies that provide services in this ecosystem or for buy-side technology from Fortune 500 companies to get the value out of AI as we think about it over the next 5 years?
Yeah, I think in the next 4 to 5 years, people need to start budgeting for the hardware because the services or the apps, need to have an environment. And some of the listeners on here are not going to like it, but the cloud hyperscalers they're just going to be too expensive in terms of the egress and ingress, as well as it's not as fast as doing it as in database. And I think if you're not buying a chip, then the alternative, again, Snowflake and Teradata are kind of the happy medium for maybe now.
Yeah.
But you are going to have to go to one of those hardware. You're going to have that hardware in your data center at some point.
Absolutely. And I want to talk about hardware and the edge in a second. Nima has some NVIDIA cards that he runs in his home. Nima, you've had to buy fans as well, correct? Every time you buy a card, you got to buy a fan with it. You want to tell this audience a little bit about the difference of training in your home, so to speak, on your own silicon versus training in the cloud to really bring to life what Sev was just calling out.
Yeah, sure. So I think, Richie, and I wanted to ask this question from your point of view as well. So there are these framework providers like TensorFlow or PyTorch. Well, they are open source, but they're backed by a company. And I think they will go into like this category of services, of course. And that kind of bleeds into the conversation of hardware. So I have been, for the longest time, I've been trying not to purchase a new hardware because well, I love it. And it's like an addiction. As soon as I buy one, I need to buy another and then add some RAM. And then, oh my God, my CPU doesn't have enough PCIe bus. So I have to buy another one, then change my main board and everything. So I tried a lot, and because of that, I had to go and try all the cloud services. Now, as I say, credit is where it's due. It is easy to use in certain cases and very hard in many cases. So you have to set up something, then you need certain permissions, then you have these services on top of these clouds that they create the machines because it's so frustratingly complex to set up your operating system, set up your like containers, your drivers, your everything, permissions and everything. And then at the end, you will run it. And then, oh my God, this model needs like, I don't know, 24 gigabytes of VRAM. And then you have to go back and then build the machine again. So companies like Google, Microsoft, they all have this different templates for different sort of cloud service to create machines, but still it is not as flexible as you want.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, Amazon is working on SageMaker or other services that lets you run your model without like creating, but still all of that frustration and all of that extra levels of knowledge that a, let's say, data scientist had to go through to run a basic model that they want to train or run an inference, it's so much hassle that you end up like buying the hardware. And I agree with Sev, definitely you are going to need your hardware.
Okay, so gentlemen, hold on to your papers. You guys know, you know what that means. Hold on to your papers. There's a YouTube channel. This guy's famous for reviewing geeky papers, and he has this phrase like "hold on to your papers." Angela, we're going to come back to this sort of deeply technical conversation. Angela, in the enterprise, are these levels of discussions happening in the enterprise right now or not? And you are you're in a large organization.
Oh yeah, I mean, look. This whole evolution has sparked a new discussion around cloud versus on-prem, and there are battles raging in companies right now between different stakeholders. Some who have worked so hard to set up these, this cloud infrastructure and to get predictive around the costs around cloud spend and do what's best for the enterprise. And then you have people with really important, and I'm going to use the naughty words of use cases internally that just say, listen, I need the compute power. I need the hardware. I need it here. I need to be able to do it on my time. I can't wait for, provisioning. I can't wait for this, that, and the other thing. And, just listening to you guys talk, hearing sort of Nima's description too, it does sort of bring me right back to sort of the heyday of NVIDIA. Like most of us got to know NVIDIA as a gaming machine company. I spent time with a son picking out components for his ultimate gaming machine for some 10th or 12th birthday, right? And you look at where they doubled down, right? They doubled down on their hardware play. And of course they started there, right? But it was almost visionary. I mean, yes, they made a lot of interesting strategic decisions that have led them here, some great acquisitions and beyond, but they're still placing their bets, right, on the hardware play. And yeah, the battle is raging within large companies around what do we do about this balance now?
So I want to, Sev, I'm going to come back to the middle here because I want to go back to this area between cloud and models in a second, and I'll go back there. Just on silicon. And by the way, there's got to be some step change in silicon that's coming. I think if you look at perovskite, there's an interesting new material there that can come out. I'm interested in Qualcomm, and I know I'm spelling it incorrectly there. There is a point where these models are going to run on the edge. And I think Qualcomm is probably the sleeper there in running this on the edge. Sev, Nima, your thoughts on that? How am I thinking about this from a Qualcomm running on the edge perspective?
And I'm taking note. I want to know the predictions, and then later we're going to check and see who won. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Sev, do you want to take that?
I was going to let you, but what I would say, Richie, is that, and I think Ange brought it up, right? Like we went through the cloud migration. I think we're going to be going to a hybrid, and then the hardware. Qualcomm could be the next, right? Like the next 5 years after that, right? So I don't. It could be the dark horse now too, right? And I think that goes to when you are an enterprise, you're buying this technology, you have to think 5-10 years versus what do I need next? And I think that goes back to what Ange brought up and you brought up, Richie, is the enterprise and thinking about this, the business side, right? Because Ange, I think you're forward thinking. I don't think a lot of the companies at the C-level or the boardroom are talking about, to what Nazim said, is to run a simple model. The conversation has to start up here as, okay, this is what we need, this is the data we need, this is the infrastructure we need, these are the human resources that we need, and to think through that whole pipeline.
So, Sev, in Qualcomm Point, I actually was thinking about it a couple of days ago and did a research a little bit. It is interesting. So one of the categories that AI needs is a massive good connection and data transition. And I think 5G, which is dominated by Qualcomm chips, is going to play a big role here. So I've seen that Qualcomm has certain practices published for AI. I don't see much effort on. At least I don't know any news about.
I think I finally stumped a professor with this introducing the Qualcomm chip to the conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, so
my answer to you, Richie, is buy the stock. It's low enough right now, and then.
Right. So let's as promised, let's go back to the middle here, and I just want to take inventory. So we're all talking about AI. I deliberately wanted to have this conversation at this level of detail because I think if you're a C-suite in a Fortune 500 company right now and you're thinking about this, you're probably thinking about this just inside of here. And there is a lot of value to get here from a customer service perspective, from an automation perspective, etc. But if you think about the service providers that have to work with you to now build industry use cases or to build specific use cases for your companies, the service providers are going to work in the middle. So for example, and I'm just going to draw a square around here, in this area right here, I think somebody mentioned SageMaker, right? So that's one. There's a lot of services that are starting to build up right between the cloud and the models that can help you train things up. SageMaker is one, is Bedrock from AWS is the other. Anything else jumps out here? I'm going to write them down.
Paddle.
You're going to have to spell for me.
PADDLE double time, like you have to, like X2, it's the name of the framework.
Any other frameworks, Sev, that you think about here that people ought to know and understand?
So I think this is where you're going in your training. I mean, you're talking about models that are, I don't want to say simplistic, maybe Nazim will agree with me or not, but like these are going into these sandboxes or whatnot and doing this. This is not custom code, custom development, product based.
Right.
If you're doing that, again, if you're a citizen data scientist, there are some really good, there's a small company called Sequoia, there's another company, I mean, Data Robot, for all the bad press that they've gotten, if you're going to dump data into something and get a number of answers in which works the best, it's pretty cost effective. Azure and Databricks, is essential to that. And then the GPS, not GPS, Google GPC, Google Cloud Platform.
Right.
Those three need to be mentioned. I do think that we should, again, I'll bring up the Teradata and the snowflakes there. But back to your list on the text, Richie, I think you're overestimating the sophistication of the boardroom. right? I think that's unstructured data,
Right.
where most people are dealing with the structured data with the systems integrators. The unstructured data, again, we'll need these Ferrari engines of NVIDIA and Intel and SambaNova just for the compute power. And if we're looking out 5-10 years, people need to start investing, especially with ChatGPT and whatnot. They need to start investing in resources that can handle unstructured data. And that's not only infrastructure, but it's also human, right? I don't think there's enough trained NLP, NLG, and NLU guys out there. And I think image and video will be next. I think the sleeping one outside of healthcare, Richie, is going to be sound, like audio sound recognition.
Yeah.
And I think that's, if I was advising 5-10 years, I'd be saying, you got to be prepared for unstructured data. You've got to be prepared for the compute power that is going to require, while at the same time using your text and unstructured data.
Yeah.
Azim, your thoughts on that?
I wanted to actually ask you, what do you think about Apache Spark, for example, or in general, Apache services for decentralized, distributed computing?
I think it's a security issue.
It is. Well, it can be. For the reason I'm asking is for the right now, what you're talking about is unstructured data, and I think the decentralization of the processing power can fix, not fix, but can fix a little bit the limitations that we're having with the hardware that exists right now.
We're going back to Hadoop, right?
Okay.
I don't disagree with you, but I think so you've got the two main industries that are buying big, healthcare and fintech. I don't think from a security standpoint, maybe for a movie studio if you're doing video or whatnot, but I don't disagree with you that is a capability. I would say practicality, there'd be some challenges.
Yeah. And you've worked at in a large service provider before. Actually, both you and Sev worked. I think you guys were at Capgemini before. This is an interesting area for me because I think, and Sev, I'm not sure your thoughts on this. I'd love to hear you. I think the service providers are positioned to really help industry here. They've done work with data, done work with clouds, done work with apps. I think the service providers, especially as you think about industry verticals, can really start to go that way and kind of create the glue between these various pieces, right, that are needed across here. What are your thoughts on the service provider's ability to provide the trust, the compliance, the things that are now necessary, because AI is more of a critical component, right? Where do you guys think the service providers are? And please don't call out one versus the other, but in general, do you think that the service providers are going to be able to meet the demand that will come from the buy side?
I personally think, and Nima brought something up that sparked this thought, which was, he mentioned 5G. And I thought the way to evaluate a service provider right now, as far as whether they're a fit to support you in this journey, is what bets did they place 5 years ago? Did they place bets on 5G? Did they place bets in supporting hardware? Did they place bets on a cloud practice? Right? Where did they place those bets? And how does their now amassed knowledge align with where you need to plug and play somebody who thinks differently? Some service providers, they place bets everywhere. And sometimes that's okay because you're looking for all shots on goal. And then there are some service providers who really double down in one or two key areas. And those areas are the right bets. And so when you think about working with any service provider, you hire them generally for two reasons, right? One is to, augment the resources that you need that you don't have within your own walls to get stuff done. And the other reason is that big S strategy word up there. And I think we need to augment strategy pretty heavily right now. And so I'd be looking at where do you actually have those pockets of strategy covered in your in-house, and where do you really need to be going and seeking out people who are 5 years ahead of you and thinking because they did place those
Right.
bets. That's how I'd look at it.
Sev, you've been out of the service provider industry for 5 years as an entrepreneur now, so give us your point of view on this question.
So I'm pretty opinionated about this. So I'm just going to warn this beforehand, is that, there's the different levels, right? There's the big four, well, there's the big three consulting, there's the big four accounting that have, and then there's the SIs. In my experience, the quality of work, it does not meet, great or exceptional for any of them, right? It's meet the expectations if best. My recommendation is that you really vet out the team that you're going to be utilizing. But that being said, I think there is a huge opportunity if they can recruit the right talent. I don't believe and I could be wrong in certain sectors or whatnot, but in generality, at least in AI, they haven't been able to do two things: is to capture the talent that's in Silicon and be able to apply that to their clients, because their business model doesn't work. Like, we have to buy some valuable assets. They put them in the consulting systems integration, and they expect sales from these big people, right? And they're not. They're tech talent. And the second thing is that those people are tech, and they need to have someone that can translate, I call geek to speak, right? Yeah. So they need someone that needs to go in and speak to the business and say, okay, what do you need? Going back to Nazim earlier, like, hey, I want to do this, but what's the pipeline of things I need to do? And then work backwards and translate to the talent. And when someone does that well, and I haven't seen it, and it doesn't mean it hasn't been done, they're going to get a really solid lock on the market.
I went ahead and I replaced all the boxes with talent, obviously being slightly facetious there. We've got the same thing internally at Mobeus. Nima is our resident scientist. We got others, right? Talent is the game. I think calling out the ability to translate the conversation is really important. The translation of not just the opportunity, but the risk, and how business models could change. I think there's a real step change in business models that's going to happen. I want to summarize here. By the back of a napkin calculation, I'm estimating that there's about $1 trillion invested in what I call real AI in 2023 already. About 10% of that is venture capital. So this is not just VCs going crazy. Probably about 100 billion in VC. This is coming from Fortune 500. This is coming from research organizations. This is coming from governments. This is coming from universities. And as usual, wherever capital goes, so does human civilization, right? We're gonna move the needle on AI. Just to wrap this conversation up, and this, Angela, this may be one of our geekiest episodes, but I think it'll be the one that drives the most value,
I know,
especially for C-suite.
It's a bit about cultural readiness here and the investment there, but go.
Yeah, we'll get to our cultural readiness in a second. I want to ask one more geeky question around this, and I'm looking for Nima and Severance to try to explain to everyone what happened. So if you look at multi-layer perceptrons in the bottom, that was 1985. That was Hinton. Recursive was probably about 4 or 5 years later. I think that was the Ellman paper. Convolutional was Lassoon. Recurrent was Pollack or Grasp or Scarcelli. And then foundational was the Vaswani paper. There's been new neural network architecture that is introduced over the last 30 years. What is the step change that actually happened when the foundational sort of model was introduced? Make it accessible and understandable for the audience. What actually happened at the foundational model?
So I think there's a couple things. I think that's a big question, Richie, that we need to unpack. Is not only do you have the academic papers that are doing this through, I think what you said, the 80s and 90s and the 2000s, but also, and this is bringing this back to my sister, my mom, my dad, is you started seeing personal computers and low cost digital infrastructure pieces, if you will, cash registers in the 90s. And then those Apple laptops, we were in college that, were like the alien brain, and then they were the colored thingy majiggy. By 2000, it was cost effective for people to have a computer. It was cost effective to have a digital cashier or whatnot. So data was being captured from more locations. At the same time, you had the big data revolution of the early 2000s that could pipe all that data and also store that data. And this also goes into the next topic about the cultural, is all of the academic capabilities that were given were now able to be proven on a population that was, the N was large enough to actually have a business impact, right? We're not academic with like, a P value of 0.0000. It's like, does this move the needle or not? And on the other side of it, we've gone from big data into data science into now AI, you could argue 15, 16, 17, and people have been claiming about all the value that AI will drive. And, for the last 5 years, it's been bullshit, right? Nothing has happened. I think that ChatGPT and OpenAI is the Netscape, again, I think everybody on this call is old enough to remember Netscape, is the Netscape event for AI. It translated to the common person, not the common person, but the regular Joe out there who can go online and use this tool. I have reservations about that, but they can use this tool, they can touch it, they can feel it, and they understand that this is not just normal data science or whatnot.
And what that created is it created the flow of energy and the flow of capital into the space, which by definition accelerates it. Nima, I want to ask you the same question. How would you describe the step change that we're seeing right now? I mean, again, back of the napkin, estimate $1 trillion invested in true artificial intelligence just this year.
Yeah, so I agree with Seb. Exactly, Seb drove the point correctly. The financial model, hardware is now cheap enough for everybody to be able to afford it. And enthusiasts, universities, students, everybody now can afford a basic level of that. So things that have been theoretized before now are that it can be actualized and tested. That's one side of it. There's whole study of future studies that you do, and you can predict when in time what computing power, what level is financially viable. But then there is another small thing here that goes into the category of data, and that is sharing. So social media created this culture of sharing data. People are now willing to share their data. They're putting their information on social media, including pictures and everything. And that also made data more available for research.
Right.
And that created this domino effect of having more data, more knowledge, and therefore better models. And that led into the idea of creating newer models. I think that's it. Yeah.
Well, we have the data availability, we have the computational availability, and then we have the maturity of the models in place. Okay, I'm going to clear the light board. Hang tight. Boom. We're off. And I am going to move on to our next visual. So, data mastery, model maturity, and cultural readiness. These are the topics that we have always felt are worth discussing as we think through use cases. So Ange, now that we've learned a lot from Sev and Nima, thank you gentlemen, and we've listened through the entire ecosystem, if you had to go lead a conversation in a C-suite right now, what's the first conversation you want to have with them with the education that we all just received just now?
Well, that's such a great question. I think the conversation right now in C-suites is about the ecosystem and where are we, what are we buying and what are we doing and what should we be doing and what kind of access should we be giving? And the conversation has not, it's a technical conversation. It's a doubling down, right, on technical quotient. I think that's important, right? We We have this awakening that we need to have talent that has a technical skill set. I'm afraid what's getting lost in this conversation is the translator mindset that Sev referred to earlier. I'm afraid that we are forgetting how important it is to prepare our organizations to have the ability to receive the bounty that is in front of us with AI. And in order to do that, we're really going to have to double down on preparing our cultures for this. And that isn't just about upskilling technically.
Right.
It's about having that translation layer, right? So that's the conversation that I think we should be having a little bit more of right now.
Yeah, timing, translation, and talent, right? It's interesting to have the arms race, but at the same time, timing matters. Okay, so we are at the top of the hour here. This is the wrap up of our show. We were talking about the AI ecosystem. Sev, I want to thank you for your time. Looking forward to the additional work that you are doing at DeLorean AI.
I was going to say medical AI is the product I would tell into boardrooms.
Yeah. Ange, obviously, thank you for your time and your thoughts. And Nima, why don't you take us out here with a final thought, and then we'll wrap up the show.
Sure. I firstly thank you, Sev. It was an honor to meet you, buddy. Yeah, thank you. It was nice conversation. It touched on many points that I am very much interested in. And have a great week, everybody.
Chai.
Guys. Good one.
That's a wrap.